I never thought silence could be so loud until the day I stood in my mother's hospital room holding a bouquet of white roses she would never see. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, that sterile, endless drone that somehow becomes the soundtrack to every important moment you wish you could forget. My fingers were numb around the cellophane wrapping, the kind that crinkles too loudly in quiet spaces. I'd bought them from the hospital gift shop downstairs, the only ones left at 7 in the morning, and I remember thinking how strange it was that I'd chosen white. She always loved red, but then again, I'd gotten a lot of things wrong when it came to my mother. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I learned that forgiveness isn't something you give all at once. It's something you rebuild, piece by fragile piece, even when the person you need to forgive is yourself. The call had come 3 days earlier, on a Tuesday that started like any other Tuesday in my carefully constructed life. I was in my apartment in Seattle, the one with the view of the water that I'd worked so hard to afford, drinking coffee that cost too much, and answering emails that didn't matter. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, a 406 area code. Montana. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was female, professional, careful. "Yes? This is Rebecca Sinclair from St. Wright Vincent's Hospital in Billings. I'm calling about your mother, Linda Mitchell. She's listed you as her emergency contact." The coffee cup had paused halfway to my lips. Emergency contact. I hadn't spoken to my mother in 4 years. 4 years, 2 months, and 16 days if I'm being precise. And I was always precise. It was one of the things she used to hate about me. What happened? My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. "Your mother suffered a severe stroke yesterday evening. She's stable now, but... Miss Mitchell, you should come. Soon." I'd booked a flight within an hour, threw clothes into a suitcase without really looking at what I was packing, called my boss, left a message, something vague about a family emergency. The word family felt foreign on my tongue, like speaking a language I'd once known, but had purposely forgotten. The flight from Seattle to Billings took 3 hours, but it felt like traveling through years, not miles. With every minute in the air, I moved backward through time, peeling away the layers of the person I'd become to reveal the girl I'd tried so hard to leave behind. I grew up in a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight, just a blinking yellow caution sign at the main intersection, as if warning everyone to proceed carefully through their ordinary lives. Our house was a pale blue ranch at the end of a gravel road, with a porch that sagged on one side and a garden my mother tended with more devotion than she ever showed me, or at least that's what I told myself for years. My father left when I was 7. I don't remember much about him, just fragments, like broken glass you find years later embedded in carpet. The smell of motor oil, large hands that could palm a basketball, a laugh that started deep in his chest. And then, one morning, he was just gone. The house felt bigger after that, emptier, like all the air had been sucked out of it. My mother never talked about it. She'd put on her waitress uniform every morning, that pale pink dress with Rosie's Diner embroidered on the pocket, and she'd work double shifts, sometimes triple. I'd come home from school to an empty house that smelled like pine sol and loneliness, make myself dinner from whatever was in the freezer, do my homework at the kitchen table while the TV murmured in the background. When she did come home, she was always tired, bone tired, the kind that settles into your soul. She'd kick off her shoes, those white orthopedic sneakers that squeaked on linoleum, and she'd head straight to her bedroom. Sometimes she'd stop in the doorway of my room, just stand there looking at me like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Then she'd close the door, and I'd hear the bed springs creak as she lay down. I learned to be quiet, learned to need nothing, learned that love was something measured in the bills that got paid and the roof stayed over our heads, not in words or hugs or the things I saw other kids' mothers do. By the time I was 16, I'd built a wall so high around my heart that I convinced myself I didn't need her at all. Stop! The hospital room was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria food. I'd found it easily enough, room 317, but I'd stood outside the door for almost 10 minutes before I could make myself push it open. When I finally did, The first thing I noticed was how small she looked. My mother had always been a force in my memory, not physically large, but immense in presence, in the space she occupied in my mind. But the woman in the bed was tiny, shrunken, swallowed by white sheets and the tangle of tubes and wires that connected her to machines that beeped in steady, heartbreaking rhythm. The left side of her face drooped slightly. Her eyes were closed. Her hair, which had been dark brown in my memories, was almost completely grey now, spread across the pillow like a cloud. I set the white roses on the table beside her bed, next to a pitcher of water and a box of tissues. My hands were shaking. "Mom?" The word cracked in my throat. I hadn't called her that in so long. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding me. And in that moment, I saw something I'd never expected to see: relief. Pure, undiluted relief that I'd come. She tried to speak, but the words came out slurred, half-formed. The stroke had stolen her voice, her ability to shape the things she needed to say. Her right hand moved slightly on the blanket, fingers stretching toward me. I took her hand. It was cool, papery, the skin so thin I could see every vein beneath. And I stood there, holding my mother's hand for the first time in over a decade, listening to the machines breathe for her, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. The doctor came in about an hour later. Dr. Chen, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a matter-of-fact manner that I appreciated. She pulled me out into the hallway, her clipboard tucked under one arm. "The stroke was severe," she said without preamble. "Left hemisphere. We've stabilized her, but the damage is significant. She'll likely regain some speech with therapy, but it'll be a long road. Months. Possibly years." "What's the prognosis?" Dr. Chen's expression softened. "She's stable now, but she'll need extensive care. Physical therapy, speech therapy, possibly occupational therapy. She can't live alone anymore. Does she have other family? Anyone who can help?" I shook my head. "It's just me." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. "It's just me." The daughter who hadn't visited in 4 years, the daughter who had screened her mother's calls, sent birthday cards with nothing but a signature, built a life 700 miles away specifically to avoid this moment. "She'll need to go to a rehabilitation facility after discharge," Dr. Chen continued. "I can have our social worker give you information about places in the area. After that," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "after that, you'll need to make some decisions about long-term care." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I spent that first day in a plastic chair beside her bed, watching her sleep, watching the monitors, watching the shadows move across the room as the sun tracked across the sky outside the window. Every so often she'd wake, and her eyes would find me, and something like surprise would flicker across her face, as if she couldn't quite believe I was real, that I was there. I should have brought red roses, I kept thinking. She always loved red. By evening, a nurse came to check her vitals, a young woman named Jessica with bright purple scrubs and a smile that was probably meant to be comforting. She moved around the room with practiced efficiency, adjusting IVs, checking readings, making notes on her tablet. "Are you staying nearby?" she asked me, her voice gentle. I don't know yet. I just flew in this morning. There's a hotel 2 blocks away that gives discounts to families, the Comfort Inn. I can write down the address if you need it." "Thank you." She paused at the door, tablet against her chest. "She was asking for you, you know. Yesterday, before the stroke got bad, she kept trying to tell us something about Sarah, about calling Sarah. She was really insistent." My throat tightened. "Did she say anything else?" "She was pretty confused by then, but she was definitely thinking of you." After Jessica left, I sat there in the dimming light, those words echoing in my head. She was thinking of you. 4 years of silence, and still, when her world was falling apart, I was the name on her lips. I found the hotel easily enough, checked in with a credit card I hoped had enough room on it, and dragged my suitcase up to a room on the 2nd floor that looked exactly like every other hotel room in America. Beige walls, floral bedspread, abstract art that meant nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone, scrolling through contacts I never called, emails I should have answered, the digital debris of a life I'd left on pause. Then I opened my photos. I rarely looked at old pictures. I'd always been the type to move forward, not back. But tonight, something made me scroll all the way down, past work events and coffee meetups and carefully filtered shots of Seattle sunsets, down to the oldest photos in my camera roll. There was one from high school graduation. Me in my cap and gown, forcing a smile, my mother beside me in a dress I remembered she'd borrowed from a friend because she couldn't afford to buy one. She was beaming in the photo, her arm around my shoulders, pride radiating from her face. I'd been accepted to the University of Washington with a full scholarship. I was getting out. That's all I could think that day. I'm finally getting out. I don't remember if I thanked her for coming. I scrolled further. There was one from my 8th grade science fair. I'd built a volcano. Nothing fancy, just baking soda and vinegar, the kind of project you throw together the night before. But I'd won 3rd place, and in the photo, my mother was holding the little bronze ribbon like it was an Olympic medal. I was standing awkwardly beside her, already too cool at 13 to show excitement about anything, especially in front of my mother. There was another from my 10th birthday, a cake from the grocery store, vanilla with pink flowers, and exactly one present, wrapped in newspaper comics because we didn't have wrapping paper. Inside had been a set of Nancy Drew books, every single one, bought used from a garage sale. I'd read them all that summer, cover to cover, some of them twice. I'd forgotten about those books. I'd forgotten so much. The next morning, I went back to the hospital before dawn. I don't know why. I just couldn't sleep, couldn't stay in that hotel room with nothing but my thoughts and the hum of the air conditioning. The hospital at 5 a.m. was a strange place, caught between night shift and day shift, everything suspended in a kind of temporal limbo. My mother was awake when I arrived, staring at the ceiling. When she heard me come in, she turned her head slowly, and I saw tears on her cheeks. The right side of her face could still cry, even if she couldn't speak properly. "Hey," I said softly, pulling the chair close to her bed. "I'm here." She made a sound, something between a word and a sob. Her right hand moved again, reaching, and I took it, held it between both of mine. "I'm sorry I didn't visit," I heard myself say. The words came out before I could stop them, raw and unplanned. "I'm sorry I stayed away for so long." She shook her head slightly, or tried to. Her fingers squeezed mine with surprising strength. "I was angry," I continued, the floodgates opening now, words I'd held back for years spilling out into that quiet room. "I was so angry at you for such a long time, for working all the time, for being tired, for not being... I don't know. For not being the mother I thought I needed. I blamed you for everything that was wrong with my childhood, with me. And then I left, and I told myself I was better off without you, that I didn't need you, that I'd built a life you could never be part of." The tears were coming now, hot and fast, years of them. But I was wrong. I was so wrong, Mom. You gave me everything you had. You worked yourself to death to keep me fed and clothed and safe. You sacrificed everything, your youth, your energy, any chance at your own happiness, all for me. And I never even said thank you. I never told you that I saw it, that I understood. My mother's eyes were streaming now too, and she was making soft sounds in her throat, trying so hard to speak, to say something back. "You don't have to say anything," I told her, my voice breaking. Just let me say this, okay? I love you. I've always loved you. Even when I was too hurt and stubborn to show it, even when I was running as fast as I could in the other direction, you were the best mother you knew how to be, and that was enough. It was always enough. I just couldn't see it. She was crying harder now, and I was crying, and I climbed up onto that hospital bed, carefully mindful of all the tubes and wires, and I held her, really held her, the way I should have done 1,000 times before. She felt so fragile in my arms, like something precious and breakable, and I wondered how I'd ever thought she was anything but that. We stayed like that for a long time, mother and daughter, holding each other while the sun came up outside the window and painted the room in shades of gold. The social worker came that afternoon, a man named Marcus with a gentle voice and a folder full of information about rehabilitation centres. We sat in a consultation room down the hall while my mother slept, and he walked me through options, costs, insurance coverage, all the practical details that felt overwhelming and impossibly distant from the emotional reality I was living. "Does she have long-term care insurance?" he asked. "I don't know. I don't think so. Savings? I doubt it. She was a waitress, single mother. The words felt inadequate to describe the enormity of what she'd carried. Marcus nodded, making notes. We'll work with what we have. There are programs that can help. It won't be easy, but we'll figure it out. After he left, I sat in that small room for a while, staring at the pamphlets he'd left behind. Places with names like Sunshine Valley and Hope Springs and New Horizons. These bright, optimistic titles meant to soften the reality of what they were. Places where people went when they couldn't take care of themselves anymore. I thought about my apartment in Seattle, the view of the water, the job I'd worked so hard to get, the carefully curated life I'd built brick by brick, specifically to prove I didn't need anyone, that I was fine on my own. And I realised, sitting there with those pamphlets in my hands, that I'd been building a prison, not a life. Over the next few days, I fell into a routine. Mornings at the hospital, afternoons handling paperwork, making calls, learning more about my mother's finances than I'd ever known, evenings back at her bedside, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in silence. I learned that she'd kept every birthday card I'd ever sent her in a shoebox under her bed. Jessica, the nurse, had mentioned it casually. She'd been helping process my mother's belongings from her apartment, and she'd found the box. Would I like it? I opened it in my hotel room that night. 20 cards, one for each year since I'd turned 18 and left for college. Some years I'd forgotten to send one at all, and those gaps felt like accusations now. The cards I had sent were brief, impersonal. Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you're well. Love, Sarah. Generic drugstore cards with printed messages about mothers being special, none of it in my own words. But she'd kept them all. Even the worst ones, the coldest ones, the ones that were basically just my signature and nothing else. She'd kept them, treasured them, saved them in a box like they were love letters. I cried myself to sleep that night, the box clutched to my chest. Doctor! Chen came by on day 5 to give me an update. My mother was improving slightly. The swelling in her brain was going down and she was showing good response to stimuli. They were cautiously optimistic about her potential for recovery, though she'd need extensive therapy. We're going to move her to the rehabilitation centre tomorrow, Dr. Chen said. Meadowbrook, it's a good facility, and they have an excellent stroke recovery program. How long will she be there? Hard to say. Could be weeks, could be months, depends on how she progresses. That evening, I sat with my mother and told her about Meadowbrook, about the plan, trying to make it sound positive and hopeful. She listened, her eyes following my face, and when I finished, she struggled to speak. Sir? I'm here, Mom. Saint... Eh? The word was barely recognisable, but I understood what she was asking. She wanted to know if I was going to stay or if I was going to disappear again. I'm staying. I told her, and as I said it, I knew it was true. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. She closed her eyes, and a tear slipped down her cheek. But this time, it looked like relief. I called my boss that night, told him I needed to take a leave of absence. Family emergency, indefinite timeline. He wasn't happy about it, but he agreed. I'd worked hard enough, built up enough goodwill that I had some flexibility. Then I called my landlord in Seattle. Told him I'd need to sublet my apartment. That took longer to arrange, more complicated, but I figured it out. I was unbuilding my life piece by piece, and it felt terrifying and liberating all at once. The move to Meadowbrook went smoothly. The facility was actually nice, not depressing at all, which surprised me. Lots of windows, natural light, therapists who seemed genuinely caring. My mother had a semi-private room with a view of a garden, and when I pushed her wheelchair to the window so she could see, she smiled, a lopsided smile because of the stroke, but real nonetheless. I found an extended stay hotel nearby, cheaper than the Comfort Inn, but clean and quiet. I set up a little office in the kitchenette, started working remotely as much as I could, answering emails between visits to Meadowbrook. And slowly, day by day, I began to learn who my mother really was. The speech therapist's name was Amanda, and she was patient and encouraging in a way that made me want to try harder myself. She worked with my mother every day, helping her form words, rebuild the neural pathways the stroke had damaged. My name is Linda. My mother would repeat over and over, the words coming out slow and thick. Beautiful, Amanda would say. That's beautiful, Linda. Let's try another one. I started sitting in on the sessions, watching my mother fight for every syllable, every sound. The determination in her eyes reminded me of something, and it took me days to realise what it was. It was the same look she'd had every morning when she put on that waitress uniform when she went to work another double shift. That quiet, relentless strength that I'd mistaken for absence. She hadn't been absent. She'd been present in the only way she knew how, by providing, by sacrificing, by carrying the weight of the world so I wouldn't have to. I'd just been too young, too hurt, too wrapped up in what I thought I was missing, to see what I actually had. The physical therapist was a man named David, built like a linebacker but gentle as a lamb. He'd work with my mother on her left side, the side affected by the stroke, helping her regain movement, strength, function. Just lift your arm for me, Linda. Just a little bit. That's it. Good. That's really good. It was incremental progress, measured in millimeters and moments. But it was progress. I'd watch from the doorway sometimes, see my mother struggle with tasks that used to be automatic, lifting a fork, gripping a cup, raising her arm, and I'd feel this fierce pride mixed with heartbreak. She never gave up, never quit, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. She kept trying, just like she'd done her whole life. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into her stay at Meadowbrook, I brought her something I'd found in her apartment. I'd finally gone there to pack up her things, to close it out and put everything in storage, and I'd found it in a drawer in her nightstand. It was a journal. Old, worn, the cover soft with age. I almost didn't open it. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but something made me look at just the first page. "Dear Sarah," it began, in my mother's handwriting. "You're 3 years old today." It wasn't a diary. It was letters. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, written over years. Letters to me that she'd never sent, never meant to send, just thoughts and feelings and things she'd wanted to say but didn't know how. I sat in her empty apartment and read them, one after another, tears streaming down my face. "Dear Sarah, you're 5 today. You wanted a birthday party with all your class, but I could only afford cake and ice cream for the 2 of us. You didn't complain. You never complain. Sometimes I wish you would. It would be easier if you'd yell at me, tell me I'm not enough. Instead, you just get quiet and I don't know how to reach you in that quietness. I'm trying so hard, baby. I know you don't see it. I know all you see is me leaving, me tired, me not there, but everything I do, every double shift, every aching foot and sore back, it's all for you. I want to give you what your father wouldn't. I want to be enough for both of us. I don't know if I'm succeeding. Some days I think I'm failing you in every way that matters, but I'm trying. God, I'm trying. Dear Sarah, you're 13 now and you barely talk to me anymore. When you do, it's in these short, clipped sentences like you're rationing your words. I know I've done this. I've made you this way. I've been so busy surviving that I forgot to show you how much I love you. You're so smart. Did I ever tell you that? You're smarter than I ever was. Braver than I ever could be. You're going to leave this town someday and you're going to do amazing things, and I'm so proud of you I could burst. But I'm also terrified, because when you leave I'll be alone. And I don't know who I am without being your mother. It's the only thing I've ever been good at, even if I haven't been good enough. Dear Sarah, you left college today. The house is so quiet now. I keep walking past your empty room and expecting to see you there, hunched over your homework, ignoring me. I know you couldn't wait to leave. I saw it in your eyes at graduation, that relief, that freedom, and I get it. I do. You needed to get out, needed to become who you're meant to be. I just wish... I don't know what I wish, that things had been different, that I'd been different. I'm proud of you. I hope you know that, even if I never found the right words to say it. You're going to change the world, baby. I know you will. I just hope that someday you'll forgive me for all the ways I failed you. I brought the journal to Meadowbrook that afternoon, my eyes still puffy from crying. My mother was sitting up in bed, working on a puzzle, part of her occupational therapy. When she saw my face, saw what I was carrying, her expression shifted. I found this, I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. I read it. I hope that's okay. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. Mom, you didn't fail me. My voice was thick, barely above a whisper. You never failed me. I failed you. I was so busy being angry about what I didn't have that I couldn't see everything I did have. You gave me everything. Everything. No, she managed to say, shaking her head. Yes, I insisted. You worked yourself to exhaustion for me. You sacrificed your own life so I could have mine, and I never said thank you. I never told you that I saw it, that it mattered. She was crying now, and so was I, and I took her hand, both hands, the strong one and the weak one. I love you, I said. I love you so much, and I'm so sorry it took me this long to come home. She squeezed my hand, and through her tears she managed 3 words, slow and deliberate. I love you. They were the most beautiful words I'd ever heard. Recovery was slow. Some days were better than others. Some days my mother would make real progress, a whole sentence clearly spoken, her left hand managing to grip something on its own. Other days we'd slide backward, and she'd be frustrated and exhausted, and we'd both cry. But we were doing it together. I started reading her the letters from the journal, the ones I thought she'd want to hear again. Sometimes I'd read her entries from when I was little, and she'd smile, that lopsided smile, and we'd share memories, building bridges across the years of silence. I told her about my life in Seattle, the things I'd never shared before, the loneliness I'd felt in that beautiful apartment. The way I'd work late because going home to an empty place felt worse than staying at the office. The relationships I'd sabotaged because I didn't know how to let anyone close. I thought I was running towards something, I told her one evening, sitting by her window as the sun set. But I was just running away, from you, from home, from everything that hurt, and I ended up building a life that looked good on the outside, but felt empty on the inside. Not empty, she said, the words coming easier now after weeks of therapy. You were learning. Learning what? Who you are. I thought about that for a long time. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd needed to leave, to build something on my own, to prove to myself that I could. Maybe that was the only way I could come back and see what had always been here. 3 months after her stroke, my mother took her first steps with a walker. I was there, holding one arm while David held the other, and we walked from her bed to the window, maybe 10 feet total, but it felt like a marathon. You did it, I said, laughing and crying at the same time. Mom, you did it. We did it, she corrected, squeezing my arm. She was right, we did it. Together. The decision to move back to Montana permanently wasn't really a decision at all. It was more like a realization, something that had been true for a while before I consciously acknowledged it. My lease in Seattle was up. My job had offered me a permanent remote position, which I'd accepted. I'd been living out of that extended stay hotel for months. It was time to stop being in limbo and start being somewhere. I found a small house to rent in Billings, one with 2 bedrooms and a garden out back. It needed work. The paint was peeling, the floors creaked, the kitchen was from the 70s, but it had good bones, and it had space for my mother when she was ready to leave Meadowbrook. I moved in on a Saturday in early autumn, the air crisp and cool and smelling of wood smoke. I didn't have much. I'd sold most of my furniture in Seattle, keeping only what mattered, but I had my mother's things from storage, the shoebox of birthday cards, the journal of letters, photo albums I hadn't known existed until I'd cleaned out her apartment. I spent the afternoon hanging pictures on the walls, placing her favourite chair by the window, where she'd be able to see the garden, making up the bedroom that would be hers with sheets I'd bought new, soft and warm. When I was done, I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt home. My mother was discharged from Meadowbrook on a Tuesday in October, exactly 4 months after her stroke. I brought her home, to our home now, and she cried when she saw it. When she saw the garden I'd started planting, nothing fancy, just some late-season flowers and herbs, that was what I was learning. When she saw her chair by the window, when she realised what I'd done. It's beautiful, she said, her speech still slow but clearer now. It's ours, I told her. We're going to make it beautiful together. We settled into a rhythm. I'd work in the mornings while she did her exercises. She was religious about them, determined to keep improving. In the afternoons, we'd work in the garden together, or I'd drive her to her therapy appointments, or we'd just sit and talk, making up for lost time. She told me about her life, the parts I'd never known, about my father, really talked about him for the first time, how he'd struggled with alcoholism, how he'd tried to quit and failed, how leaving had been his way of protecting us from his own demons. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it, made him human rather than just the villain I'd cast him as. She told me about her own childhood, growing up poor in rural Montana, the daughter of a single mother herself, how she'd promised herself she'd break the cycle, do better for her own child, how hard she'd tried, how afraid she'd been that she was failing. "You didn't fail," I told her, over and over. "You never failed." I told her about my life too, about the therapist I'd finally started seeing, working through layers of hurt and anger, abandonment issues I'd carried for so long, the things I was learning about myself, about relationships, about what it means to be vulnerable. "It's scary," I admitted one evening, sitting on the porch as the sun went down, opening up, letting people in. "What if they leave? What if I'm not enough?" And my mother took my hand, her grip strong now on both sides. "Then they leave, and you survive, like we did." "What if I don't want to just survive anymore?" she smiled. "Then you live, let yourself love. It's scary, but it's worth it." I started reconnecting with people from my past, old friends from high school who'd stayed in Montana, who'd built lives here. I'd always thought they were stuck, that they'd settled for less. But as I got to know them again, I realised they weren't stuck at all. They were rooted. There's a difference. One of them was a man named Michael. We'd been in the same grade, sat next to each other in chemistry, but I barely remembered him. He'd become a teacher, taught high school science at the same school we'd graduated from. We met for coffee one Saturday, just as friends, and ended up talking for 4 hours. "I heard your mom had a stroke," he said. "How's she doing?" "Better. Getting better every day." "And you moved back?" "Yeah, I guess I did." He smiled. "That's brave." "It doesn't feel brave. It just feels like, I don't know, like where I'm supposed to be." "That's the definition of brave," he said. "Doing the thing you're supposed to do even when it's hard." We started seeing each other regularly after that. Nothing rushed, nothing pressured, just two people getting to know each other, taking it slow. My mother liked him. She'd smile her crooked smile whenever he came over, and she'd insist on making us tea. She could do that now with supervision, and sometimes she'd tell him embarrassing stories about me as a kid. It felt normal. It felt right. Winter came, and with it, snow, the kind of snow I'd forgotten existed, the kind that transforms everything into something magical and clean. My mother and I would sit by the window, watching it fall, and she'd tell me stories about winters when I was little, about sledding down the hill behind our old house, about hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. "I forget that," I said one evening, watching the flakes drift past the glass. "The good parts. For so long I only remembered the hard parts." "Hard parts were real," my mother said, "but good parts were real too. Both true." She was right. Both were true. And I'd been doing her a disservice, doing myself a disservice by only holding on to one side of the story. On Christmas Eve, we decorated a tree. A small one, just 4 feet tall, but perfect for our little living room. I'd bought ornaments, and my mother had found some old ones from storage, and we hung them together while Christmas music played softly from my laptop. One of the ornaments was a paper snowflake I'd made in first grade, my name written in crayon on the back. She'd kept it all these years, moving it from place to place, never throwing it away. "Why?" I asked, holding it up. "It's just paper. It's falling apart." "Because you made it," she said simply. "Because it's yours." I hung it on the tree, right in front, where we could both see it. That night we sat together on the couch, watching old Christmas movies and drinking hot cocoa. Michael came over for a while, bringing cookies his mother had made, and the three of us sat there in the warm glow of the tree lights, and I thought, this is what I was missing. Not some grand adventure or some perfect life in a big city. Just this. Just people who care about you, sitting together, being present. My mother fell asleep on the couch, her head on my shoulder, and I stayed very still, not wanting to wake her. Michael smiled at me across the room, and I smiled back, and everything felt exactly as it should be. Spring came slowly, the way it does in Montana. A few warm days followed by a cold snap, snow in April, then suddenly everything blooming at once. My mother and I planted a real garden this time, vegetables and flowers, working the soil together with our hands. She was moving better now, her speech nearly back to normal, though she still struggled with certain words when she was tired. But she was her again. My mother, the person I'd never really let myself know. "I want to go back to Rosie's," she told me one afternoon, kneeling in the dirt beside me, planting tomatoes. "The diner? Just to visit. See if it's still there." We drove out the next weekend, taking the long way through town, past the old house where I grew up, different colour now, someone else's life, past the school, past all the landmarks of my childhood. Rosie's was still there, same faded sign, same checkered curtains in the windows. We went inside, and the smell hit me immediately. Coffee and bacon grease and pie, the smell of every morning of my childhood. A woman I didn't recognise was working the counter, but when she saw my mother, her face lit up. "Linda? Linda Mitchell? Oh my God!" It was Rosie herself, older now, greyer, but still Rosie. She came around the counter and hugged my mother, then looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Sarah? Little Sarah, look at you!" We sat in a booth, and Rosie brought us coffee and pie, on the house, she insisted. And she and my mother talked about the old days, about the other waitresses, about customers who'd been regulars for decades. I listened, learning about a whole side of my mother's life I'd never known. How she'd been the one the other waitresses came to with their problems. How she'd covered shifts when people were sick, helped train new girls, been the backbone of the place for 20 years. "She was the best," Rosie said, squeezing my mother's hand. "The absolute best. We fell apart after she had to leave. Nobody could replace her." My mother blushed, pleased and embarrassed. "I was just doing my job." "You were family," Rosie corrected. "You are family." When we left, my mother was quiet, looking out the window as we drove home. I reached over and took her hand. "You okay?" "I miss it," she admitted. "Not the hard parts, but the people. Feeling useful." "You're useful now. You're useful to me." She smiled. "I know, but I want more, want to feel like me again." I understood that. She'd spent her whole life working, providing, being needed. And now, even though she was recovering beautifully, she was struggling with this new role of being the one who was cared for instead of the one doing the caring. "What if we found something?" I suggested. "Not full-time, just something a few hours a week. Volunteer work, maybe? Just something to get you out, interacting with people." Her eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" We found a place at the community centre, nothing demanding, just a few hours twice a week helping with their senior lunch programme. My mother loved it. She'd come home energised, full of stories about the people she'd met, the conversations she'd had. "I'm not just the stroke lady," she told me one evening, her words tumbling out faster now, excitement making her more fluent. "I'm Linda. I'm me." Watching her reclaim herself piece by piece was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever witnessed. Michael and I got serious that summer. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was gradual, natural, like water finding its level. We'd go for walks, cook dinner together, sit on my porch talking until midnight. He understood about my mother, never made me feel like I had to choose between them. Often he'd include her in our plans, and the three of us would go to movies or drive out to the lake or just hang out in the garden. "I like him," my mother told me one evening after he'd left. We were sitting on the porch watching fireflies in the growing dark. "Me too. He's good for you." "What makes you say that?" "He sees you, really sees you. And you let him." She was right. I was letting him see me, the real me, not the carefully constructed version I'd presented to the world in Seattle. The messy, complicated, still healing me, and he didn't run away. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if I mess it up?" My mother laughed, a real laugh, full and rich. "You will, everyone does. But that's not the point. Point is, you try anyway." In August, we went back to visit my father's grave. I hadn't been there since the funeral when I was 7, hadn't even known exactly where he was buried. But my mother knew, had visited occasionally over the years, and she wanted to go together. It was a small cemetery outside of town, older headstones mixed with new ones, wildflowers growing between the rows. We found his marker easily. Simple granite, just his name and dates. David Mitchell, 1965 to 2002. Beloved father. I stood there, looking at those words, feeling nothing and everything at once. "Tell me about him." I said. Really tell me, not the sanitized version. The truth. And she did. She told me about a man who'd been funny and charming and deeply troubled, who'd loved me fiercely but couldn't love himself, who'd fought demons I couldn't understand and ultimately lost, who'd left not because he didn't care but because he cared too much to let us watch him destroy himself. I was angry at him for years, my mother said, staring at the headstone, for leaving, for giving up, for choosing alcohol over us. But then I realised he didn't choose. He was sick and he didn't know how to get better. Do you forgive? She thought about it for a long moment. I understand him. Maybe that's the same thing. I knelt down, touched the cold granite. I'm sorry I never got to know you, I said softly. I'm sorry you were hurting so much. I hope you found peace. My mother put her hand on my shoulder, and we stood there together, 3 people connected by blood and love and loss, finding our own kind of peace. That fall, I got a call from my old boss in Seattle. They wanted me back full-time in the office. Promotion, raise, all of it. I need to think about it, I told him, even though I already knew my answer. I talked to Michael about it that evening. We were in the garden, harvesting the last of the tomatoes before the first frost. It's a good opportunity, he said carefully. It is, but my life isn't in Seattle anymore. It's here, with my mom, with you, with this garden and this house and this town I spent so long trying to escape. He smiled. So you're staying? I'm staying. Good, he said, and kissed me, his hands dirty with soil, mine full of tomatoes, the sun setting behind us in shades of orange and pink. The 1-year anniversary of my mother's stroke came in November. I almost didn't mention it, didn't want to make a big deal of it, but she brought it up herself. A year ago, I thought I was dying, she said. We were sitting in the living room, the afternoon light slanting through the windows. I know, I was so scared, not of dying, but of dying without seeing you again, without telling me what? That I was proud of you, that I loved you, that none of it was your fault. I felt tears prick my eyes. None of what? The loneliness, the hard times, my choices. I wanted you to know that you were always enough, more than enough. I moved to sit beside her, took her hand. You were enough too, Mom. You were always enough. She smiled, tears on her cheeks. We were both enough. We just didn't know it. Michael proposed on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after that first Christmas we'd all spent together. He did it simply, just the 2 of us on the porch, snow falling gently around us, a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I love you, he said. And I love your mother, and I want to build a life with you, here, in this place you've made into a home. Will you marry me? I said yes. Of course I said yes. And when we went inside to tell my mother, she cried happy tears this time and hugged us both and said she'd known all along. How? I asked, laughing. Because you look at each other the way your father and I used to look at each other before everything got hard. That's real. That's rind that lasts. We got married in May, in the garden behind our house. It was small, just close friends, Rosie from the diner, some of my mother's friends from the community centre, Michael's family. My mother stood with me, steady on her feet, her speech clear and strong, and when the officiant asked who gave me away, she said, I do. But really she gives herself, because of who she's always been. Strong, independent mine. I cried through most of the ceremony, happy tears, healing tears, tears for all the years we lost and all the years we still had ahead. That summer, my mother and I took a trip together, just the 2 of us. We drove up to Glacier National Park, something we'd talked about doing when I was a kid but never had the money for. We stayed in a little cabin, hiked easy trails, sat by mountain lakes and talked about everything and nothing. One evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, my mother said, Do you ever regret it? Regret what? Staying? Giving up? Seattle? The career? The life you built? I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I regret it? Did I miss that apartment with the view of the water, the important job, the impressive title, the carefully curated life? No, I said, and I meant it. That wasn't my life. It was just what I thought that my life should look like. This you might call the house, the garden, the community. This is my life, the real one, the one I actually want to live. She squeezed my hand. Good, because you know what I regret all the years. I was too scared to tell you. I loved you, too tired, too worried, too convinced. I was failing to just say the words. I don't want you to make the same mistake. I won't, I promised. I love you, Mom. I'm going to tell you every single day for the rest of our lives. That's all I ever wanted to hear. Now, 2 years after that phone call that changed everything, I sit on my porch on a warm Tuesday evening watching my mother in the garden, teaching my stepson, Michael's 7-year-old son from a previous marriage, how to plant marigolds. She's patient with him, gentle, showing him how to make a hole just the right size, how to tuck the roots in carefully. She's fully recovered now, her speech almost completely normal, except when she's very tired. She still goes to the community centre twice a week, still has coffee with Rosie once a month, still fills our house with life and laughter and love. Michael comes out onto the porch, hands me a glass of iced tea, sits beside me. We watch them together, my mother and his son, heads bent over the flowers, dirt on their hands, the evening sun painting everything golden. You happy? He asks. I lean my head on his shoulder. I'm home, I say. That's better than happy. And it is, because I finally understand what I spent so many years running from. Home isn't a place you escape from. Home is the place you return to, the place that holds you when you're broken, the place that helps you rebuild. Home is messy and complicated, imperfect, but it's also where the people who love you are waiting, always waiting, ready to forgive, ready to start again. I'd spent so many years thinking I needed to run to find myself. But the truth is, I found myself in the returning, in the coming back, in the facing of hard truths and the healing of old wounds, in the garden I planted with my mother's hands guiding mine, in the way she looks at me now, with pride and love and no more regret. The white roses I brought to the hospital that first day, I'd thought they were wrong, thought I should have brought red. But now I think maybe they were exactly right. White for new beginnings, white for peace. White for the clean slate we gave each other when we finally stopped running and stood still long enough to see what had always been there. Love. Imperfect, complicated, human love. The kind that survives everything, even silence, even distance, even all the years we wasted being too afraid or too hurt or too proud to reach out. My mother looks up from the garden and sees me watching. She waves, smiling that smile I know so well now, and I wave back. And in that simple gesture, mother and daughter seeing each other across the space between, there's an entire conversation, an entire lifetime, an entire world of things we don't need to say anymore because we finally understand. We finally understand that we were always enough, both of us, exactly as we were. If this story touched something in your heart, if it reminded you of someone you need to call or someone you need to forgive, maybe even yourself, I hope you'll leave a small whisper in the comments below. Tell me about your journey home, wherever that might be. Tell me about the person who taught you what love really means, even if it took years to recognize it. And if you'd like to listen to more stories like this, stories about the complicated, beautiful, heartbreaking reality of being human, just stay close. Subscribe. Let me whisper these truths to you one story at a time until you feel a little less alone in this big, messy world we're all trying to navigate. Because that's what we're all looking for, isn't it? To know that someone else has felt what we've felt, that our struggles matter, that our pain can transform into something beautiful if we're brave enough to face it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Until the next story, take care of your heart. And maybe if you can, reach out to someone you've been meaning to call. They might be waiting to hear from you, the way my mother waited for me.